Let's talk about the mass literature of the post-Soviet period. In the last lecture, we were talking about how in the Soviet times mass literature was not encouraged or had an ideological character. Instead of this gap, in the beginning of 1990s and even a bit earlier, a huge torrent of mass recreational literature poured in. It mainly consisted of translations, because there were hundreds of authors of mystery and romance novel who were not translated into Russian in the Soviet period. Within this torrent, there was room left for proper Russian mass literature, but on the one condition: Russian literature should imitate the Western one. This was the case for everything at that time. Any television program that appeared in the 1990s had some kind of analog in the Western TV, usually American one. It occurred just in this way with literature in that time. Ready-made samples and preset genres were transferred to Russian soil. Heroes were given Russian names and characteristics, placed in certain circumstances familiar to the reader, so he or she could identify with them. And as a result appeared a new mass literature. We will try to characterize it briefly while determining some specifics, because it's all imitation. In all imitation there still appeared some form of Russian accent. We'll start, of course, with the mystery genre. Already in the 1990s, two lines of the mystery genre were being developed. On one hand, these were the works of former policemen and investigators who, like the Weiner brothers, one time, using authentic material and their own experience, showed various crimes solvings. On the other hand, there appeared a completely made-up, so-called satirical mystery genre, or ironic mystery, which awaited a great future. To this day it remains the leader in sales. In the departments of mass literature there is only one criteria for success: how many copies are sold. Look at this slide. You see the queens of ironic mystery genre. I purposely put them in the order in which winners in a sport competition are placed: Daria Dontsova, Tatiana Ustinova and Yulia Shilova. These ladies won gold, silver and bronze on the amount of sold copies, as well as the amounts of written books. Daria Dontsova was unrivaled among all Russian writers in this respect. What is this ironic mystery? This is neither Soviet invention nor a Russian one. The founder of this kind of mystery is a Polish writer, Johanna Chmielewska, who had been writing one book after another in this genre starting from 1964 and up to our time. The heroine of this books was very similar to the author usually, and she got involved into various difficult situations, unraveling different crimes. I would define this satirical mystery story briefly as anti-Holmes. Let us recollect the essence of the Holmes phenomenon. First of all, Sherlock Holmes relies to his mind and logic. In ironic mystery novel, the investigation is conducted by a woman who does not pretend to have great deductive abilities. Instead of it, she believes that her intuition is very highly developed. In addition, she is lucky. She comes across some evidence or other clues just by accident. Secondly, Holmes is known to be a sociopath. Now, from the series with Benedict Cumberbatch, everyone knows that Holmes is an effective sociopath. Cumberbatch played him in this way. This man does not feel comfortable communicating with people. The heroine of the ironic mystery is surrounded by a huge number of relatives, friends, and most importantly dogs and cats, and other pets which must arouse the sympathy among the readers. And so on. List other features of the classical English mystery, such as the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie, and by the process of elimination we can come to the features of contemporary Russian ironic mystery. For many reasons, it became the most popular genre. And perhaps one of these reasons was that it is a travel reading. In Russia, there are long distances, many travel by train, and there are no better way to occupy one's head until recently than reading such a book. On the other hand, the genre of action was also very popular in 1990s. But it too had a Russian specifics. Usually a hero of action in American or European literature is a sheriff or policeman, the servant of the law, who struggles with bad guys, often revenges for his comrades, helps the victims, and destroys the villains one after another. In Russia, the specificity of 1990s action was that the protagonist in it was often a bandit, or a hero who took the position of both a bandit and a cop. A good example is the huge saga by Viktor Dotsenko dedicated to the madman, or Savely Govorkov as he is actually called. The main hero, who served in the special forces, has all necessary qualities of the hero of the action. He went to prison, he became the bandit, escaped from the prison and began to help the police to solve the rather complicated crimes. So he again gets to the service. But in some cases he is a servant of the law, in others he is an enemy of the law. But in essence nothing changes. This in many respects of course reflects a real situation that existed in Russia in 1990s, the blurring of all boundaries. The romance. It's a genre that has a gigantic history in Western literature. And by the way, it flourished in Russia before the revolution, but during the Soviet era it was not encouraged at all. Here it is probably difficult to find out Russian specifics. Perhaps it consists in the fact that very many stories of that kind in Russian literature are placed into historical scenery. For example, in the works of Elena Arsenyeva, writer from Nizhny Novgorod, almost all the love stories from the lives of famous women from Russian history, starting from the most ancient times, have been described. But I must say that in the novels of Barbara Cartland, the queen of English historical romance, there were no fewer historical figures. Mass fiction does not pretend to novelty. Much less popular in Russian pop literature was the thriller. Maybe because that in the 1990s and even in 2000s it was not necessarily to frighten anyone. It was scary enough to live without it. In any case, the Russian Stephen King did not appear, and many writers that were expected to take this vacancy were actually not so much engaged with mass literature as with elite literature, as Anna Starobinets, for example. The science fiction. The science fiction has divided into two currents, two sleeves. On the one hand, mass science fiction, which always existed in series. It describes the adventures of the same hero and exploits the same methods. The most famous kind of this work is the Watchers series by Sergei Lukyanenko. It is partly translated into English. The Night Watch, the Twilight Watch, the Last Watch, and some other watches. These novels describe the struggle between the forces of good and evil, and the ancient gods and demons live among us in our times in big cities as human beings. It reminds a bit American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Incidentally, it shows one more feature of contemporary literature. True popularity can be found only after the screen adaptation. In the case of Lukyanenko, after the blockbuster The Night Watch. And on the other hand, there is something which can be called the serious science fiction. These authors are frequently the pupils of the Strugatsky brothers, like Vyacheslav Rybakov from St. Petersburg, who under his own name as well as under pen names was creating the works which directly continued the philosophical and social science fiction that brought fame to Strugatskys in the 60s and 70s. In the field of fantasy, there are also two directions, or two currents. As is well known, everyone who wrote fantasy was to some extent Tolkien's epigon. But Tolkien can be imitated in different ways. It is possible to invent completely artificial worlds, races, people, monsters, wars between them, their history, without relying on true mythology and history, simply imitating the original source. Tolkien's books, original source. But one can go another way, and Russian literature had found this second way by the late 90s. This is the so-called Slavic fantasy. Some writers did thought that, just like Tolkien relied on Celtic myths and tradition of northern mythology, Scandinavian, German, Icelandic and others, why cannot one lean on pre-Christian pagan Slavic mythology, which is perfectly well studied by the generations of Russian folklorists and mythologists, and particular success in this regard waited Maria Semenova, the author of a number of novels, the most famous of which is the Wolfhound, screen adapted of course, where the action takes place in a pagan environment before the Christianity, and the myths, legends and belief on ancient Slavs are widely used. Along with this genre is another form of fantasy, which can be recalled satirical fantasy. And the best example here is probably works by Mikhail Uspensky. His remarkable trilogy, The Saga of Zhihar. Zhihar is the name of the main hero. Another name of this trilogy is Where We Do Not Exist. In these novels, Russian fairy tales, myths, legends, proverbs, sayings are used, but in a very unusual ironic key. Unfortunately, it is not still available in English. Another feature of the mass literature of the 90s and 2000s is editors and authors thinking in series, in the terms of series and projects. It is impossible to imagine a work of mass literature which has not a possibility of continuation, if it was success. Writers in many series became masks. It is no secret that many famous writers are in reality literary factories, where lots of nameless ghosts work. In some cases it cannot be hidden. Look at this face. A girl who will not give you an autograph, she is called Marina Serova. In fact, Marina Serova, an intelligence officer according to the annotation on the book cover, does not exist and never did exist. About 170 different writers were working for her, and all of them are not known to anyone. This paradigm of pop literature existed, not changing too much from 1990s to our days, although some new motifs appeared, depending on the changes in the society. In the years of prosperity, the literature about so-called New Russians or Nouveau Riche, New Riches, had appeared. Oksana Ropsky, who was writing about them, became the most popular in the 2000s. Oppositely, there appeared anti-glamour literature in the guise of Sergei Minaev. But the main genres of mass literature were strictly settled, and we will not talk about them in the next lectures. With just one exception, that is of the writer Boris Akunin, who tried to bring about a kind of revolution, combining methods of non-genre and genre literature.